but they drag a club down to be strategic and innovative if we're spending all of our time talking about tactical topics. One of the key points of strategic governance is food and beverage. I'm sure nobody in this club that ever talks about food and beverage, right? Never. Well, strategic governance is embracing food and beverage as an amenity, and we'll talk about that there at the end. But the financial focus is the capital needs. How much capital income do we need to fund our footprint, to continually expand, to make our experience even better? We'll show here with data in a minute. Capital income doesn't come from operations. Operations is funding the experience that you all have and that you all enjoy. So this bucket slide here has kind of gone viral. This came out right at the start of the pandemic. To really help a club understand pretty basically what bucket are we? You know, with these 4 or 5 column stress test questions that you might see. So the red bucket clubs on the left, which is about a quarter of the industry, these clubs are literally shrinking. They shun change, they're stagnant. They don't have enough members, they don't have enough dues revenue to fund its footprint. Their members think like a customer. Well, if the Tito's goes up another quarter, that's it, I'm done. I'm not gonna tolerate this anymore. Now I say that in jest, but that happens at clubs. That's a real statement in clubs. Why are you leaving? The booze are too expensive. That happens. But these shrinking clubs, they don't have enough capital. The place is falling apart. There's buckets in the grill room because the roof's leaking. How come this can't get fixed? Well, we don't have any initiation fee. We slashed it 20 years ago. Then you get the yellow bucket, which is half of the industry. And these clubs are kind of flat. And as a preamble, right now, Marietta is a yellow bucket club. You're trending to green with some data that we're going to talk about, but half the clubs are just kind of stagnant. They're not declining, but they're certainly not thriving. And then there's the rest of the industry, which is the green. And these clubs are dynamic, they're growing with purpose. We use purpose on purpose. They're not growing because of dumb luck or coincidence, or they're in Greenwich, Connecticut, or San Francisco, or Washington, D.C., or Naples. There's green bucket clubs in Topeka, Kansas. There's red bucket clubs in Naples, Florida. Location has an effect, but it doesn't drive the outcome of the club. Everything on this slide goes back to choices. Choices that are made in the boardroom, choices that are made at the committee level, choices that everybody and members make of why they join the club. In those green bucket clubs, those members by most are thinking like an owner. Strategic stewardship is a term we use a lot. They want the club to be better. I want to invest for my children, my grandchildren. I want the club to be better than it is now. It's like the old adage, leave the golf course better than when you played it. Replace your ball marks, fix your divots, all that. Strategic stewardship is the same with the club. I want the club to be better than it is now. But that takes capital income. That takes money from the members. So this is kind of a, it's a detailed slide, it's wordy, but a lot of times people say, how do you know you got to like the top? What's our end goal? How do we know we did it? What are we doing all this for? And I would say if you're doing these 2 things, you've done it. Now the first is you have a waiting list because you have such a great experience, not just during the years of COVID, which we know has been a boom for golf. As a sidebar, did anybody sitting at your kitchen counter or whatever, watching the news, whatever it was, March 12th, 2020, look over at your spouse and be like, this is gonna be great for the club? Did anybody say that? We were thinking like, oh my God, we're gonna lose half the clubs. The industry's done, it's over. And it's completely opposite of that. So 52% of clubs right now have a waiting list. We'll see if that's true in a year or so. I'm cautiously skeptical. And then the second is the financial side. So first is we have a waiting list. We've got a professional staff delivering the experience, and it's compelling and dynamic, and people want into our club. And we're generating enough capital income, continually update our facility, not just build the shiny new toys, but keep up with what we refer to the obligatory capital. Air handler units, parking lots, ovens, cart paths. Nobody's gonna join this club or any club because they pulled up and your parking lot's paved. But you gotta do it. Nobody's gonna come in for a tour and go home and tell their wife, like, oh my God, I was just over at MCC. The building was so cool, it was awesome. They had air conditioning. You gotta do it, but you have to fund it. That requires capital income. And you think about 42. 42 is the average age for a first-time private club member. It's been very consistent for a number of years. And the wants and needs of a 42-year-old in 2022 are much different than the wants and needs of a 42-year-old 25 years ago. I'm 45, I have a 7 and 8-year-old daughter. They don't play golf, my wife doesn't play golf. I've worked in clubs my whole life. Like, wow, maybe now I'll actually join a club, how about that? So, there's a lot of clubs in my area, I live down near Cape Cod. Where do you think, and I love golf, I've been playing golf since I was 5. Where do you think the golf experience falls on the importance scale at home? It's right here under the lectern. What's the food like? What's the fitness like? Do they have a pool? Do they have cooking classes? Do they have family programming? Do they have a splash pad? Do they have this? Do they have that? So, as you evolve and as you look forward, the wants and needs of a 42-year-old can't be ignored because that's your next generation of members. It doesn't mean you cater everything for the 35 to 50-year-olds, but they can't be ignored. Their needs are changing. Generational diversity is a real challenge in every club because the wants and needs of every generation is different than the other. So, we'll do a little rhetorical exercise. Think about when you join this club and think about why. Think about your friends that you have here and the reasons that you know why they joined. You live in the area, you love the golf, you like the family stuff, the pool, maybe you like the social environment, maybe you met a spouse here, maybe your parents were members, maybe someone in your business was a member here. All pretty standard reasons why you join a club, right? Did anybody join because you heard the club had a high margin on its lobster salad? Were you shopping clubs and you said, well, you know, I don't know, but Marietta's got a low payroll ratio. They don't have any staff, so I think I want to be a member there. So it's this efficiency debate. I'm not mocking efficiency, but nobody joins clubs because it's efficient. But then many often when we're in the grill room or in the boardroom or on the golf course, it's all we talk about. How many people do we need to take care of this golf course? Why do we need 2 bartenders? Can you do this? Can you believe that? Has anybody approached anybody in the grill room and said, I'm a little concerned that we don't have enough capital? Have you seen our balance sheet? Nobody talks about that. So, the make this place great perspective is, you know, you don't double your dues, obviously, but you make the choice to fund the footprint for the experience that the club says we're going to have. That all goes back to mission and vision and who we are. Now, everybody has one of these perspectives. So, like everything in society, right? There's no common ground anymore, right? You're either right or wrong. But on this, the common approach is somewhere in the middle. You don't double your dues, but the club should fund its footprint from both operating and capital, as opposed to leaning on efficiency, but recognizing that's not why any of us join, and it won't be why our future members will join. A couple of slides just for time I'm going to come over, but there's 2 ledgers in every club, including in Marietta, the operating ledger and the capital ledger. The operating ledger is funding your experience. It's where all your dues revenue goes, your food and beverage revenue, guest fees, outings, cart fees, and it goes right back out the door, paying the tax bill, paying the staff, paying vendors, keeping the building clean, taking care of the golf course, heating and cleaning the pool. It's not a financial driver. It's literally funding the experience. What the financial driver is capital income, because that's what's going to get the club what it needs to maintain its asset base and hopefully continually expand and do projects like you did at the pool. And then in the future, there'll be projects for the golf course and other expanded outdoor dining or whatever the club ends up deciding to do. But that's going to come from capital income. It's not going to come from the margin on food and beverage. So this slide is just, you know, everywhere I go, as Daniel said, I present clubs all over North America, and every club, to some degree, says, Well, listen, this is all really good and we love the data, but it's just a little different here. And that reason could be anything. Geographically, the amenity mix, our demographics, whatever. But Marietta is a member-owned, not-for-profit private club. You have the same fundamental business model as 3,500 other private member-owned clubs in North America. The scales are different, the cultures are different, the geographic locations are different, obviously. But just like those other 3,500 clubs, you have sources of operating money, as I just alluded to, and you have uses of that money. And same on the capital. You have capital sources of money, initiation fee, capital dues, assessments, and then the uses of that money, your asset replacements, all of the capital that you need to fund your footprint. So this is just very high level, just to amplify, but we think these are the 5 key concepts through data that clubs that have compelling memberships, healthy financials, and satisfied members possess these. And we're gonna go through these here really quick for the next 15, 20 minutes or so. So the first is that clubs are a high fixed cost business and that this term of expenses are bad. I was a GM for 12 years. Expenses is an 8-letter curse word. If you have expenses, you're a poor manager. People hate expenses. Expenses aren't driven by efficiency, they're driven by our footprint and the scale of the experience we want. Not the efficiency, it's the choices we make of our footprint and what type of experience we want. That's what drives expenses. So it's logical to say, boy, the clubs who spend the most though, they must be mismanaged. They must be inefficient. They're probably worse off financially than the clubs who spend the least. That's a logical thought. Because in many businesses, low expenses are what you want. You need the margin, especially in things like manufacturing. But there's Marietta there. Last year, you spent about $12,500 on operating expenses per full member equivalent. The median is $17,000. So we take a look on the left here. These are the medians. These are the medians for the clubs that spend the most and the medians for the clubs who spend the least. And the data is very compelling. The number of members, the initiation fee is 10 times higher on the clubs on the right because they're delivering a compelling member experience that costs money, that people are seeing the value for, that they pay for. Now, your club's a little different because you have so many members. So there's a little bit of context there. For a 27-hole facility, you have a lot of members. So that'll dilute that a little bit. But it's still $5,000 below the median. Now, does this mean the secret recipe is to just go spend money with reckless abandon? Absolutely not. But when it comes to funding the experience, that costs money. And the choices we make of the experience we want is what drives that expense. Quick thing on non-golf sports, as I already said, I love golf. I've been playing golf since I was 5. But one of the challenges in the industry at golf-centric clubs, whether it's a golf club, a country club, a gated community, it doesn't matter, is this appetite, if you're a core golfer, to say, we don't need all that other stuff, we should just invest in golf. Why do we need the pool? Why do we need fitness? Why do we need the playground? If we just invested in the golf course, we would be just better off. So this is all part of the peeling emotion away moment. This is what the data says, just following the data. So that yellow pie slice across those pie charts across the top is the expenses allocated to non-golf sports. And as it grows to the right, the data is very compelling on the medians of what it does to the clubs. So these clubs on the far left, they are golf only, by definition. They have no non-golf sports. Their median initiation fee is $23,000. The clubs on the far right, these clubs actually spend more on sports than they do course maintenance. Think about that for a second. They spend more on sports than they do course maintenance. Their median initiation fee is $64,000. And they're still spending just as much on the golf course as the true golf-only clubs. The member count, the dues, the operating revenue, in some cases it triples. So again, I'm not telling you to go out tomorrow and do more non-golf sports investment. But the data says the more non-golf stuff we have, we're going to have more members, we're going to have a higher initiation fee, we're going to have more dues revenue. And this is Marietta on the left. Your yellow pie chart is 7%. The median in the industry is 10. So you fall right in this middle bucket of the clubs that are 5 to 10. Now you have a higher initiation fee, but one of the things we talked about at the board level is it doesn't mean we underfund golf, but you might have an opportunity as you, and your pool project, once you get another full year under your belt, that 7% is going to grow. You're going to have higher expenses at the pool. It's bigger, it's better, it's more experience, but guess what? That costs money. Your course maintenance is 28%, the average club is 31%. Your golf operations labor is 11%, the average club it's 11%. You can see on the margin, your pie chart is very close to the club on the right, which is the average. So I put this in here only for the purpose to educate about the yellow pie slice, but also the point that if our expenses are kind of allocated in the same manner as the average club in roughly the same amounts, how could we say we're different? And we're not. You're not. You have a very standard business model that's shared by thousands of clubs. Not every industry is driven by price. Not every industry is a commodity based. Clubs are a lot more like a highly differentiated product, like a jewelry store, than it is a widget manufacturing plant. A widget manufacturing plant is completely predicated on keeping our expenses as low as possible and selling those widgets for as high amount as possible so we have the high margins, we make money. But a club is a differentiated product. It's an experience. Especially at a club here, your initiation fee is $55,000. Nobody's joining this club because it's cheap. Nobody's coming to this club and be like, oh yeah, well it's $55,000. Now $55,000 might be different to every other person depending on their income, but it's still a significant amount of money. Nobody's joining this club because it's cheap. So we think about comparing the industry, and this is really directed at just everybody as a whole, whatever you've done externally, whatever profession you come from that affords you an opportunity to be a member, not every industry is like the private club, so it doesn't mean that what works in industry XYZ is how we should run the club. It's just not the same. It's just not the same. So that blue line there, that's the net operating margin of about 1,000 clubs. Marietta had an 8% surplus last year, the median was 5%. These percentages are inflated because most clubs got ERTC money through the COVID program. Your money is coming next year because of your fiscal year. So you don't have any money in this, that's coming next year. But the gold line is capital income. Capital income as a percentage of our total operating revenue, which is a standardization of the size of the footprint. The median was 18%, Marietta was 15%. So we take a look at the this right here depicts what I said earlier about the operating ledger is funding the member experience. But the capital income, it's right here. You had double the amount of income generated by capital versus what you made in operations. But far too often, all we're talking about is the 8%. We need to talk about the 15%. How do we get the 15% up? Now you may consistently have a surplus, which is fine, but most clubs set their operating ledger to break even about 70%. Excluding depreciation, 70% set their operating ledger to break even, plus or minus 4%. But the capital income is the financial driver, and it's illustrated here with this chart. Our founder, Ray Cronin, he's kind of a big, everybody remember The Far Side, the cartoon? Kind of wants to change this to a Far Side with, the club's trying to move forward, but the ball and chain is the members against everything. Nothing will work. That's a terrible idea. Bad, bad, bad. This club's terrible. I've been a member for 40 years. So we don't move this forward. I say that in jest, but we see it all the time with satisfaction. The most loyal members are the most dissatisfied. But they're not leaving, but they're very dissatisfied. Ironic, right? All right, so net worth. Net worth is the book value of the club. Okay? You have assets at this club. They were acquired either through equity meaning money from the members in some way, shape, or form, or a liability, debt, or some type of loan, or a bond, or whatnot. There's our buckets again. You see our bucket friends again. So Marietta's growth rate over the last 15 years is down 1%. And I'll show you here. You have a pretty interesting story here to tell. So here's your data over here. So in 2006, the balance sheet at Marietta, the value of the club on paper was $9.3 million. And then in 2015, it kind of bottomed out at $4.2 million. But since 15, it's more than doubled. It's more than doubled. Last year it was $8 million. It's going to be even higher when the club's audit's completed due to the investment that you did at the pool. Now this is just to educate. This is not intended to, I don't know what happened these years. That's not what this is about. This is just to show you the history. This is to align and educate. 99% of people who serve on boards at clubs have good intentions. But many times decisions are made without context or data. Those emotional decisions sometimes drive things like this. So the point is you have a great story. You're back up. You're on a trend to be a green bucket club. Consistent, compelling net worth growth. We think it's the most important financial metric. If your net worth continued to do this, you would not be doing investing. You wouldn't have any money. Or it would all be through bank debt, which you still have a fair amount of debt that I'll show here in a second. This is a good thing. You're on the track up. This is the path we want. We want more of this. We want this direction to keep going. So a quick snapshot. This is a little tricky because your fiscal year is the end of August. So we're literally looking at data that's a year old. This is from your August year end. But your data is in blue, and then the average of all clubs is in green. Your liability and equity, you can see at the top, you're a little more heavy on the liability side because of the amount of debt that you have. Now at the end of the last fiscal year, your debt to equity ratio was about 100%. The median in the industry is 20. But that's going down because your debt's going down, because the club's paying it down, and your equity's going up. So there's still work to be done here, but it's getting better. Your cash to asset, last year the club had a lot of cash because it was building money for the pool project, but that'll level out. One of the last ratios here is just the indication of the amount of depreciation on the building. So Marietta is at 27%, which means that the asset base as a whole is relatively depreciated. Some things are brand new. There's some things that are 40 years old and everything in between. So it's not a broad brush that every asset's this. This is a hybrid and a mix based on your assets. But this is growing as you invest. Next year, this data gets updated. This ratio is going to improve because of the investments you've made. You've done work in this ballroom. You did the work at the pool. When you invest more than depreciation, this ratio increases because we want to get this up. The lower this is, it's just more hidden debt because it's going to mean that there's just more and more stuff that's going to have to be replaced. But again, this is moving up. It's on the upward trajectory. Clubs compete on value, not on price. That's a really important thing. The clubs that have the highest dues, the highest initiation, and the highest expenses have the most members. It's not like buying a flat panel TV. They all have the same technology. Why would you spend $500 more than one that has the same technology? Clubs aren't like that. It's an experience that we're pining for. About 5 slides left. Obligatory capital, aspirational capital. Every club's got these types of capital. Obligatory capital is assets already in place. Irrigation system, bunkers, kitchen equipment, furnishings and fixtures, all of the assets you currently have, those need to be replaced. Some things need to be replaced sooner than later. But we think the source of that, for a best practice, are your capital dues. Kind of a pay-as-you-play concept. The members using and consuming the assets, funding the replacement of those assets. Then you have aspirational capital. That's literally expanding the footprint of the club. And we think the practice for that is this is where your initiation fee money comes in, and maybe debt, depending on the project. What we don't want to see is too much debt being used for obligatory capital, because that's a cash flow crunch on capital, and then there's not enough capital to do anything else because we're paying for debt. So if you think of it as a fairness mechanism, if someone's been a member of this club for 20 or 30 years and they use an asset for 20 or 30 years, you can make a fair argument that that person bears responsibility to replace the asset they've been using. And then the initiation fee and debt can come in maybe to do the new stuff. And if you use debt, the current and future members are going to be the ones paying it back, but they're also going to be the ones enjoying the investment of it. Same when we do debt for obligatory capital, the current and former members use the asset, but the current and future members are going to pay for it. And every club has this hierarchy. We need capital to fund our debt. We have to have capital for obligatory. We can't over-ration the obligatory capital. Obligatory capital is not luxuries. Obligatory capital is replacing the stuff you have. And then that third tier is the aspirational, where we actually build a golf learning center, expand a patio, whatever it may be. And if you do all those, then you just put money in the bank. We haven't worked with a club yet that's just put money in the bank. I've never been in a boardroom and someone says, Chris, our biggest problem is we don't know what to do with all our money. Usually there's not enough of it. Couple KPIs, your dues ratio, it's like your cholesterol report. Of your total operating revenue, how much is coming from operating dues? You're pretty much at the median. You're 50%. The industry median is 51. We want it up and to the right as far as possible. We want a business model that's driven by dues revenue, as opposed to these clubs, the leveraged ones, they don't have enough dues revenue. So they're chasing every wedding, outing, bar mitzvah they can get their hands on because they just don't have enough members. And then their business model becomes on the margin on the non-dues revenue, which puts tensions back on operations. Always a hot button payroll. The median payroll ratio is 53.6%. So our total payroll is a percent of operating revenue. Marriott's 52.7. On the margin, literally at the median. To be specific, 43rd percentile. The takeaway is you're not heavy on labor. Last two on food and beverage. So I will not, I promise, I could talk at nauseum about food and beverage. I gave my word to the group that I won't, but this goes back to our perspective again, and this one I'm respectfully probably pushing a little bit on the members as a whole, the audience. If you have a perspective that you think the club should be making money in food and beverage, which is okay. Maybe you have a restaurant background, maybe your family is in the food industry, whatever, that's fine. But a club's not like a restaurant. So if we think clubs should be making money in food and beverage, what is the perspective that opinion comes from? In 2019, 80% of clubs, the whole industry, subsidize food and beverage to some degree, 80%. So are we saying that 80% of the industry is grossly mismanaged and incompetent? Pandemic year, 2021. That blue line is the financial outcome in F&B as a percentage of dues revenue. So is it gonna wander up here? It's like that game on The Price is Right, the guy going up the mountain. Okay, right there, that's breaking even. 95% of clubs last year subsidized F&B to some degree. Marriotta's subsidization was equal to 9% of its dues revenue. The median was 10. So the only takeaway for this is, if you have a perspective that the club's off the walls because it's subsidizing food and beverage, you're right at the industry median. So, one more, this is pre-pandemic. Because they're like saying, well yeah, COVID, of course, we're gonna subsidize with COVID those last 2 years. This is another one of those charts that if you just peel emotion away, let's assume you knew nothing about the club's finances, you knew nothing. Would you hope the club fell in this bucket on the far left or this bucket on the far right? These are the clubs that are choosing to make money in food and beverage. I say choosing, it's an important word, because it is, it's a choice. It's a choice to make money, it's a choice to subsidize. The median profit was 3% of dues revenue. Not 30, not 13, 3. So right there, we're talking about nothing that's going to dictate the financial outcome of the club. 3% of dues. The clubs on the far left, their median subsidy was 16% of dues. But then you take a look at things like the number of members, the initiation fee, and the amount of equity on the balance sheet. And look how it changes when you go from the clubs who are subsidizing it the most down here. If you knew nothing about this club, which bucket would you hope it was in? You want to be on the far right with the lowest member count, lowest initiation, or do you want to be over here? The whole most important part of this slide is all these clubs, all these 25% that made money or broke even, they must be making all kinds of money in operations, right? The median operating surplus of those clubs is less than 2%. The median for the clubs that subsidized it the most was literally break even. Now, are there outliers? Of course. But we're looking at data, we're looking at medians to develop and identify trends. And the point is that the amount of subsidy in F&B has no bearing on the financial outcome of the club. Dues, always a hot topic. This is a chart of clubs that only have an initiation fee of at least $50,000 or more. I'm not here to tell you right now your dues are low. The data says your dues are low, which is okay. It's not a judgment, it's what the data says. Of these clubs, Marietta's in the 4th percentile. The median is 12,000. Now, does geography factor in a little bit? Sure, but not as much as people like to think it does. You know, you can buy a house in Tulsa for less than it is to join Southern Hills. Do you think they're stressing about the local cost of living index? I mean, we're in Atlanta. You're one of the 7 or 8 largest metropolitan and affluent areas of the country. So the only slide is just for context. I'm not here to tell you what your dues should be. But again, if you have a perspective that our dues are high, it's just a little context to throw you there. So, and those are our 5 concepts. Just one more time. No efficiency. Your expenses at the club are driven by the footprint and the scale of the experience, not necessarily applying our external lens to the club. Hey, I made a lot of money doing this. This is how the club should be run. We have to resist doing that unless we have the full context of the data. Understanding net worth over time, the equity, and that clubs compete on value, not on the price that they charge. All right, and with that, I'm probably, well, not too bad. Questions, comments?
How often do you interact with the board? Are you a regular?
With this club?
Yeah.
We did a Zoom, I think fall of 21, and then I was here in person in April, and we did a board presentation in April, and I'm here tonight. Okay. Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you. Chris, appreciate it. Kind of disappointed with one part of your presentation that you came out first and said you weren't a consultant, because that took about 10 minutes off of my speech of what we would talk about. The second thing about tonight is that it really is a beta test for the next annual meeting, whether we can actually have alcohol before the meeting starts instead of afterwards. We'll go from there. A couple of key takeaways that I had, and I think the board did. Can you hear me okay? All right, sorry, thanks. The operating from GGA, who also with club benchmarking we utilize to help us look at things. The operating budget really drives member experience, right? So where we really like to get to is that we zero out that number every year. So whatever the operating budget is, we're gonna go spend it on the membership and use that going forward. Daniel and his team are gonna be given a budget once it's approved, and then they utilize that budget for the member experience. The board really should not get involved with those things. Cold beer, green grass, great food, those are the things we want to have from our operator or management team. The capital budget we did talk about, it's really about maintaining our assets and growing our net worth. That's a unique concept, I think, to me, and I think others that have gone through the club benchmarking presentation. Because, I'm not going to do the, cheeky thing about everybody raise your hand that's been on the board or say or done a committee. but we always struggle with how do we know whether we're doing the right things? And I think they've given us some metrics that we can go back and now take a look at it. How are we doing that? So really, the capital budget should be about maintaining our assets and growing the net worth of the club. I can tell you right now, we're playing catch up. We haven't done a great job on our capital programs over the years. Back when I ran finance, I think our budget was about $600,000 a year for capital programs. When GGA came in, they told us based on the size of the club, our assets, we should probably be at about 1.1 million. Based on the work that Club Benchmarking did, over the next 5 years, we're gonna have to spend $1.6 million to be able to just maintain our assets going forward. So I think those are some of the things that we need to look at. You know, I think that we need to continue to grow our capital and look at how do we bring up a war chest for unforeseen events, have the ability to add services and amenities to keep our club current. So I think those are things that we need to keep looking at. A strong health warning is the board cannot spend any money without membership approval. So even if we have some money in the rears, we can't do anything with it without your ability to allow us to spend it. So kind of shifting on to what I was supposed to talk about, looking at the director of golf search, really tough kind of talking about having to find a replacement for Stephen Kepler. We're not going to find a replacement for Stephen. He is a unique individual. Karen, Jonathan, Jordan, they're all members of the family here. We will be looking to do something for Stephen towards the end of the year, but it's a difficult thing that we have to go back and look at. So what we've done is we've taken a four-pronged approach to it. We've re-engaged GGA. We have a selection committee put in place. The board will be involved, and then all the membership will be involved as well. So we've re-engaged GGA partners to provide a national search for us. They'll administer the search process in conjunction with the selection committee. They're going to have an open PGA. We've opened the search to, hang on.
This really sucks. Glasses.
We're all human. There we go. So we've opened up the search to multiple PGA sections across the country, hopes of finding the best candidates, evaluating applications. The selection committee is going to work closely with GGA partners throughout the process. They'll receive and evaluate the applications to ensure an open process. It's made up of a cross-section of golf members to find the best fit for us. The members, many are here tonight, of this selection committee are Christian Rayner, Will Allen, Susie Harton, Don Campbell and Brian Moore, Stacey Hoppinschild, and Daniel and myself. The board will be involved as well as we did with the selection for the general manager's position, and we'll continue to communicate where we are in the process. And then we have gotten a lot of feedback from membership already. It is a coveted position, so a lot of people are interested in it. Be assured that anybody you send in to us will be put into the mix to look at. Timeline, we really have an aggressive timeline. The plan to have the new person in place by early December. Stephen has agreed to stay through the end of the year. So we will have a transition period with him as well. It really is a desirable position, and we have no doubt that we'll find a really good candidate going forward. Master planning. Clubhouse and campus master plan. We've hired a new architect to go back and review this for us. Steve Power, he's done a lot of projects for country clubs, recently Dunwoody and Athens. He's working on the master plan for the entire campus. We're going to take a holistic approach on the update, and we'll have multiple phases to go back to the membership with. So we're really just in the development stage right now, looking at what the options are, and then where we'll go forth from that going forward. I know everybody's got their wants and needs, whether it's a card room, event space, card staging, workout areas. There are a lot of things that we need to go back and take a look at. So we're making sure that all those things are being considered. The golf course, we've re-engaged Bobby Cup, formed a small committee to go back and look at some of the things with Bobby. The short game area seems to be a top priority and a new focus. So that's one of the things that Mark and his team is working on. We've actually engaged some not architects, but construction companies to take a look at it so we can get a feel for what the cost of that might be going forward. I know everybody talks about tee boxes, irrigation, drainage, and greens. Those are all currently in the 5-year capital plan. One of the favorite things talking about is our annual meeting. Last year was kind of a boisterous meeting, and hopefully this year won't be as much, but some of the comments were, people were taken off guard on what we were going to talk about. This year, it'll be the normal thing that we'll go through for the approval of the slate of the board of directors. And also there will be a bylaw change recommended again that was proposed last year. So under Article 2, Section 4, and Article 3, officers, directors, and committees. So what we'll be proposing is going back and looking at voting which may singularly be cast by the member or the member's legal spouse. So the gist of this is that both members within the household are equity members, 1 vote per household. Either member may serve on the board of directors. So the rub on that is that the board of directors, under their authority, have the ability to change equity membership at any point in time, and we have done that. So this is just formalizing that for the rest of the membership. Club performance. Club continues to perform very well through June. Operations, we're at $112,000 over the budget of $261,000. Capital spend is on plan, right at about $1.2 million. Year-end cash is at about $4 million projection. Debt is at $7.8 million. Realize we refinanced last August. Took out a new loan at $8 million. We're paying that loan off at about $17,000 per month. Operating budget going forward, we're projecting right now a 10% dues increase, representing a net increase of $615,000. 5% of this is a payroll increase, and really a lot of that is to retain our employees. All areas are seeing budget increases across the membership or across the committees. Grounds and golf are going to be increased by $395,000. So grounds and golf are going to go up 85% of the budget going into next year. We're working on, the largest part on that is to get some H-2B seasonal workers for Mark to come in, and they'll be here through the growing season. So again, hopefully we'll be able to increase the maintenance of the golf course with that. If you looked at our last dues, it was June of last year. This new increase would be coming in September of this year, so it's 15 months. So if you looked at a 10% increase for 12 months over 15 months, the net increase would be about an 8% increase. Capital budget, we're projecting a $40 per month capital increase over the next 5 years. Based on the work that Club Benchmarking did for us, we're going to need to spend about $8 million, which is about $1.6 million a year. You go back to what I said before, we were operating at about 600,000. GGA, too many initials. GGA was recommending about $1 million to 1.1. So you can see we have a deficit of about $500,000 from that. Even going with this new capital charge, it's only going to cover about 75% of our capital needs. So the rest of that's going to have to come from initiation fees, which means that the capital that we would want to use for growth in the other bucket will have to be stymied for a little bit. And again, just taking a look at it, grounds and looking where we're going to spend the money, we'll be getting about 60% of that over the years. As I said, the irrigation, greens, in other areas within the course are within that budgeted note. Closing. Everybody's got an opinion. Everybody wants to be involved. Applications for committees are now open. I strongly urge you to take the opportunity to apply to get on the committee and have your voices heard, and then also to be able to understand more about how the club is run. So with that, happy to take any questions.
This might not be.
There's a microphone over here. So
You probably can hear me, I talk pretty loud. This might not be the proper time to bring this up, but I talked to another board member. You just talked about getting on committees. You just talked about applying for committees. I'm here on behalf of the minority in this club. I use the health facilities. They are atrocious. There's no money spent down there. The machines don't work. The glass is broken down there, and we consistently spend money on other things. And there's no representation on this board for the health club members. If you wanted to sign up for a committee here, I'll look at it. You don't have a committee for that. You don't have a representative for that. And I think this club needs that. This man has talked to you about improving those things, but we don't improve them. We haven't improved them in years. And there are a lot of members here that use those machines and they're broken. You can't use them. They're not operational. And they've been that way for years. I'm asking this club to do something about that and give somebody some representation here on a committee to inform y'all about this problem.
So that would fall under the tennis.
It won't. It won't.
I'm sorry, please let me.
All right.
Okay. It would fall under the tennis because it's within that facility. Second is that the board has approved to lease 5 new pieces of equipment because we realize the equipment there is crap and needs to be replaced. And part of the master plan is specifically focusing on an enhanced exercise facility.
I appreciate that. We
Okay.
need that. But you putting us on a tennis committee, the tennis people, what they need and what they want is totally different from that. I'm asking you to consider the fact that maybe you ought to have another committee that reports to this board about the health club. You may not want to do it, but you're not getting any input. How many people come up here from the health club that are doing what I'm doing tonight? There's a problem.
You know what? It's a great suggestion, and I will take it with the
Thank
board
you.
under
Thank
consideration
you.
for
I don't
sure.
want to be a problem.
No.
I just want to bring this to your attention.
No, I mean, there's enough problem makers in here too. I'm not looking at anybody specifically.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Club's doing great. Appreciate it. Thank you. And maybe we'll have alcohol at the meeting.